recording right now.
Okay.
Great.
Great. Okay.
Well, we'll officially start in a minute, but just a request for people in the future webinars, if you send your questions in advance, a little more than the day of, it gives us time to process a little bit more. But thank you for everyone who's sent in your questions.
Yeah, I think, you know, for this one especially, we had Easter, so the promotion of the webinar was kind of delayed and just on time. But we tried to do the promotion like more sooner and try to do that time for people think and make questions. That would be great.
Well, and just one more comment, our webinar last week got a lot of hits. Do you know how many? To date, it was thousands when I looked
Awesome.
a couple days ago.
Yeah, I think it went over like 3,000.
I know. So thank you, Dr. Bowman. I think she may be able to join us tonight, but we really appreciate it. And I think that webinar will have a big impact.
Yeah,
Well, it's 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock. Zoe, should we get
Dr.
started?
Bowman is here.
Oh,
All right,
hi, Dr.
so-
Bowman. Thank you
Dr.
for
Bowman's
joining.
in the house. Hey, Dr. Bowman.
All
Well,
right.
just
Thank you so
in
much,
time for-
Dr. Bowman.
So cheers, everyone.
Welcome.
Cheers.
Welcome
Cheers.
to Wind Down Wednesday.
The way we enjoy spending our time together apart.
We need to drink, right? When he does.
I think you're supposed to have a
I think
sip,
it's
don't
good
you?
luck if you have a
It's good
sip
luck.
and you make eye contact.
I'm gonna have two then.
All right, well, our topic today is a hot topic. It's with a lot of interest in how we provide services to children and families through telehealth, and particularly with an interest in sensory integration. And maybe we should everybody could introduce yourselves. Should we start with Kelly?
Sure. Hi, my name is Kelly Aldright, and I'm an occupational therapist since I think I met Zoe and Suzanne and Annie when I worked at PTN years ago. So we all kept in touch. Sorry, my lighting's dark, but I am hiding from my son. So.
You know, Kelly, if you closed your blinds, we might be able to see your face a little bit better.
Okay, let's try that.
That's your first telehealth tip and trick.
There you go. Look at
That
that. Yeah. Front lighting is better than back lighting.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Oyen, and I work at the Launchpad Therapy for Kids with Shuri, and we are in California.
Nice. Annie?
Oh, sorry. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Annie Baltazar-Mori, and I am the owner of PlaySense, which is a clinic here in Redondo Beach, California. And I've been working with Zoe and Suzanne for years, and I'm just excited to be here.
And Cherie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cherie Francis Bogeman. I'm the owner of the Launchpad Therapy for Kids in San Juan Capistrano. And I've been feel very privileged to be a part of this group. We as occupational therapists get together once a month on Wednesdays, and we keep we're inspired to keep sensory integration alive and cutting edge. And I'm very grateful to be a part of that group. And how do we move it forward and spread the word?
Great.
And hello,
Asia?
I'm Asia Rowley, and I am a therapist at Center Point for Children in Irvine, California. And I'm also launching into the telehealth world and very much in private practice, and trying to figure out how to help or best support our families in this really difficult time. And I'm so excited to be part of this group. I think that this is like a very innovative think tank of therapists who are really, you know, day by day learning from this new world we're living in. And I'm so happy to have this support network. And I'm so glad you all could join us for, you know, hearing a little bit about our challenges and our successes as we really kind of trial our ideas in this new avenue and platform.
You know, I just want to say we're so lucky to have this amazing team gathered, and it's I think it's fortuitous in a way that you know, we have technology during this time, and that we have such a bright young set of minds helping us problem solve how to reach families in these new ways. So thank you all so much. We feel so lucky to have you with us at CLASI and putting your ideas together so that children and families continue to be supported.
Well, the questions kind of divided into 3 sections. One is about how to set up your environment. The next was about assessment and intervention. So I think that we'll start sort of in that order. We're going to try to end promptly at 6, but let's start with the setup. One of the questions that a lot of people have is, the children have varying conditions in their homes. Some have big homes with a lot of resources, some have very small spaces, some have few people, some have a big family. I mean, so we're not dealing with one environment when we're setting things up. So one of the questions was, where in the home do you provide these telehealth services?
Well, I'll start with that question. I think that is such a big piece of your collaborative therapeutic process with the family, especially on your initial session and then subsequent sessions even. But I usually like to have the family give me a tour of their house. What space do you have? What space do you want us to use? And I often, you know, kind of gauge with the parents, how comfortable are you with if I'm allowing your child to maybe take all the couch cushions off or climb up the side of the door frame? You know, like, is there space in your house where maybe there could be some more out of the box ideas that are a little bit, and the space can be kind of malleable and manipulated to kind of suit the needs of the child? And so for me, that's very much varied. I think I'm working in a garage with one family. I'm working in a bedroom with one family. Sometimes the backyard is a nice option, the living room if there's no other space. But I think you have to get very creative and really be very open to what the family is comfortable sharing with you, because they are letting you into their kind of private space. But also, you know, gauging where is the space that we can use to really kind of engage in novel, playful tasks, and you're okay with the room getting a little messy. So, yeah.
It sounds like you're kind of evaluating the space as an affordance. Like, what can you not move? What can you move? What could you change? How many people have to use that space? Do they have to clean it up after everyone, or could you kind of set it up? So it seems like that analysis is really critical, so you don't make people crazy. You know, like, okay, we're going to change up the room here, but then somebody else has to use that room in 5 minutes. That's right. Going to be disruptive.
And you know what I realized I did, and it was more for my own clinical reasoning, which actually very much helped. The first day, I very much said, you know, let's explore your space. I'd love to see what you have. You know, what fun things do you do with your child, and what, you know, where do you have to work with? And then I've made an equipment list of things that I found that could be valuable that they already had in their home, and I sent that to them, because that was just my thought process, and I thought it was a resource for the family. But as that subsequent weeks have gone on in me treatment planning for these families, I found that I've revisited that equipment list that I made to remind myself what that family has. And then it's actually really helped my clinical reasoning in and like my treatment planning. So that was a very nice, I didn't mean to do that, but I'm glad I did.
And, you know, Suzanne, that comment about the affordances, I think that's so important, because one of the things we've all been talking about as you all have been working on these, putting together ideas for telehealth, is the idea that, you know, we really want to try to use this opportunity to help parents understand the why behind the activities that we're doing. And so thinking about the environment and what it provides and being able to communicate that is such a key piece of the whole picture. I just did a podcast this week with a group from England, with a family, a couple who have 6 children. I think all of their 6 children have disabilities. They've adopted them. And they were telling me that, you know, they have twins who have autism who really need a lot of movement, and they were struggling with that. And as we talked about sort of the affordances of what they had available, it dawned on them that their best days they're having is when they take these boys out in the car and they get far out of the way and can go kind of fast, you know, go a lot at pretty high speed, and roll down the windows. And it just, you know, that really helped them to see that it was that vestibular kind of sensation they were getting. So I think this idea of really analyzing the environment and helping families to understand what those affordances are is a key piece. So that's a great point.
And maybe redefining play spaces, what a place spaces really mean, and thinking about it differently. I'm sorry, I might have interrupted someone.
Oh, I was just saying, I found actually that when I'm on that virtual tour, I see things differently than the family. So usually the family will be telling you, well, I have this and I have that. And I'll say, well, let's look around. I'll be like, oh, what's that there? Wait, hold on, show me that. You know, because our eyes as ASI trained therapists see things very differently. And so I've been able to come up with more ideas based on just them kind of panning around too during that tour.
We've actually discovered some cool things too. Somebody had a couch like the Nugget. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a component couch for kids, and it comes apart. And so they can use it for obstacle courses. They could use it for a tent. But so it's kind of been fun to see what people have in their homes and what we can share with other people as well.
Well, one of the big questions that came up several times is like, even if you see the spaces, how do you capture the children's attention with this format? And I think that came up in several questions, but particularly for children with autism.
I was definitely challenged by this because I was seeing, so we also serve a school district, and I was seeing a child in a special school for kids with autism, and his biggest challenge was he would elope, and he was eloping from the teachers, eloping from me. So I thought, how in the world am I going to capture his attention enough? So I knew he had an interest in trains, so this is how I started the session. So when he came on the screen, I was ready for him.
Well done, Sherry. Well done.
And that was enough to at least start the conversation with him. And then I had the train game, and then we could move on. But what I've been finding is, first of all, we're not only grabbing the kids' attention, but we're also having to let the parents go, it's okay, you know, let me just engage with them a little bit. Let me just chat with them. Sometimes we have to address the arousal and even establishing rapport with them before we launch into the session. So we have to be really sensitive to those elements before we just jump in. Sometimes it's having a simple conversation. And there were a couple kids where the parents were very mildly agitated that the child wasn't listening. I'm like, that's okay, just let him be. And one kid showed me his magic tricks, you know, and so we got to play that for a little bit. But then the first couple sessions, it's just really establishing that rapport, that we, you know, have this give and take, and that they can trust me. And then I can invite them into more active movements and start to bring in the vestibular and the proprioceptive pieces. But I think it really begins with establishing that relationship and letting them explore the virtual environment. Katie and I laughed because she was saying, I've never met so many pets in my life this week. Everybody wanted to show us their pets and their toys, and oftentimes we'd see, you know, they're show and tell, and it's like right up there in the camera. So I think just starting with that, and just as we do as in the clinic, we give them space and then we move in a little bit, see how they respond. But yes, you definitely have to get creative and think outside the box. It's a lot of fun, and it does take some preparation.
You know what, you guys, this question really spoke to me, and especially I finished treating at 4:30, and my, half-hour kiddo that I just finished up, he has very short attention span. He's, he's on the spectrum, and for the past few weeks, the sessions have been 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes on a really good day. I've been getting him familiar in a space, and we're kind of keeping the structure there. And for some reason, something just wasn't working. So today I'm like, let's go outside. Let's change it. It's a really nice day. It's quiet outside. And he was engaged 30, 35 minutes, with very little prompting. He had that safe space. Mom and dad weren't around. He had his behaviorist with him, but he, wasn't so focused on opening and closing the doors in the house. So creating the right space is really going to help. It's really going to help with that regulation and their ability to attend for longer. And kind of a little word of wisdom is, even if the first few sessions or moving forward, they're only attending for 5, 10, 15 minutes, you take what you get and you move on from there, and it will build over time. It really, really will.
And how long do you plan your sessions for? I know the attention span is probably going to vary based on the activity and the client, but is there a time frame that you shoot for?
It really depends on the child. It really does. So I'm not going to push them past what they're comfortable with, because I don't want to create a sense of dysregulation for the rest of the day. And if they can't tolerate, a full 50 or 60-minute session, hey, let's break it up a couple times during the week and let's build from there.
I spoke with this family that this kiddo that she's treating, and that's exactly what we did. First of all, the mom said, you know what, he's not used to you coming into the home. It's like when he goes to the clinic, that's when he's engaged with you. And when you're showing up in the home, he's not accustomed to somebody coming in, and not so much that we place demands, but we're trying to get them engaged for sure. And we realized that this mom really needed support in the home. So what we did was we moved from the 2 1-hour sessions to 30 minutes 4 times a week. And we kept it at the same time just to support that mom and the behaviorist that was in the house. And that was a nice change. And to be able to have that flexibility was helpful.
That sounds good.
I think one thing I'd like to just add to the discussion of keeping kids engaged is that, remembering who we are to those children. And we have a special relationship that we've already built for many of the kids that we're seeing. And when we come to their home, it's like one of their good friends is there. And for a lot of the families that we've been seeing, it's like their children associate us with a certain type of play. And they're ready to get into that as long as we're ready, and we're ready to get going. And so, when we're really working on all of that movement, the sensory motor, that really active play, sitting at the table is not the kind of friend we are for them. And so we really, from the get-go, decided that's not the kind of play we're going to do. And so our kids, I feel like they've really, the second they saw us on screen, they were like, oh my gosh, and they were so happy to see us. And of course, we got the tour of the home, all the animals, all the favorite loveys, all that stuff. But I think, if you're hesitant to go into telehealth, remembering who you are to that child, and you are still that person. And the second they see you and hear your voice, it'll all come rushing back to them.
Annie, while you're mentioning that, I'm wondering if you have any strategies, or you've had to think about how you kind of separate your interaction with the child versus the parent, because, we do that in a therapy session. We have the parents there, but we try to be very focused on the child and take the time that we're going to talk about the child with the parent. We try to keep that separate. So have you had that come up in the telehealth sessions?
Well, yes, it's very much a blend these days, I would say. And of course, you have to use very child-friendly language, and it's really exercising that skill for sure, because the child's listening in. So it's a lot of, hey, mom, it's okay, let's take turns now. How about, if the child has decided they don't want to catch anymore, they want to be the thrower, and maybe mom is feeling like, no, you have to catch. Annie said catch. You know, it's a lot of, no, let's switch it up. It's totally fine, and explain it a little bit. And then, you know, often if there's something specific we want to explain, we'll follow it up in an email afterwards, or a text, and let the family know this was really great. Next time, maybe let's focus on, you know, allowing the child to set up for themselves. I've had a lot of conversations with parents about it being about the process, not the product, and how even though I'm recommending that you have these tools available, I want the child to be able to set them up. So have them available, meaning know where they are, and to be able to guide your child to them, because part of that process of organizing and regulating is to be on that hunt and search and putting things together and paying attention that whole string of time from when you're in front of the screen to when you go to your room to get a pillow and to come back. And so those conversations, I think, have been things that we've had to have, but you definitely have to be very conscious of that parent-friendly language, or the child-friendly language, excuse me, and making sure that you're coaching all the way through it to get your needs met, but being aware that the child's listening.
Well, it sounds like that flexibility that you have is going to help reduce some of those challenging behaviors that you might otherwise encounter if you have a little bit more rigid set of ideas about how the exact flow and the exact time. Children may not conform to that.
Well, and the non-conforming time, like the time where you've lost the child, I've been really, you know, you don't have full control of your therapy space. Your environment is not in your control, which I think is part of the most anxiety-provoking part for therapists who are launching into this world. You can't control the regulatory environment of the space a lot of the time. There's siblings, there's pets, there's things, right? And the child might be real disinterested in dealing with you on this virtual platform, especially if they've spent like a bunch of their day with other educators or their teachers, you know. And so what I've found is when I've lost the child and the parent is, you know, so frustrated, I take that time to touch base with the child. I'm like, you know, give them a break. They want to go and be in there. Okay, well, why don't you read a book for a minute, and I'm going to check in with mom. And I've actually used that time, instead of, you know, trying to pull the child back, I've actually been using that time to go, well, why don't we just talk for a second and check in? And I think that that's been a nice balance. So I keep going back and forth, and then the child comes back and engages. Or I've told the mom, well, this is our time to set up the next activity. What should we do with the child now? He's done with this one. What could we do next? And just give him that time. He doesn't need to be a part of that, maybe. And let's just get something fun that's going to bring him back, you know? And that seemed to be effective use of the time, especially when the child is running away from the screen or not interested.
Can I?
You know, I'm noticing that we're getting some questions.
Yeah.
Marco, are you tracking those? And
Yes, that's what I was about to say, because I think there's a very interesting question here, because we're talking about the process when, you know, we have access to parents and child homes, but we have people from all over the world here actually today, and some countries and some cultures are kind of more, you know, private about their homes and letting people in. And I'm sure you found those parents as well, like people that don't understand how you can do the same, or you know, keep therapy as teletherapy. So what do you do in those cases? How do you talk to parents and show them this is important and can be valuable, even and especially when they are very private about their privacy? What do you do then?
You know, I think that I've had some success in just being able to say, like, let's give it a try, or, you know, why don't I first start by sending you some activities to try on your own. And if you want to send me a video of them doing it, I can look at that and give you suggestions, or I can come in and they've been able to, most have been open to letting me in, but you have to manage their stress level a lot. They're not used to playing like we play. They're not used to putting their, you know, how, you know, you're just watching them try to do it. And I take myself back to when I was a student being watched for the first time and how much anxiety I would get from that. And so I really try to say, you know, reinforce that they're doing great and say, you know what, okay, let's take a moment, let's stop. And then like, sometimes I've even used my son as an example in videos that I send them of like, here's what this might look like, you know, to give them a lot of priming with those things. And most have been open in there. And I've seen like exponential, I'm on week 4 or 5. These parents who first started, who were really kind of awkward in how they used it, are really now starting to think more like I do, you know, and you're seeing them make these changes and having these aha moments. And it's been wonderful, but you have to kind of start slowly with them. And sometimes it's just offering them some home programs, you know, and over time, I think as this has been settling in, more and more parents are kind of like, okay, like let's try it. You know, they're realizing this is a longer reality than it was initially, you know, and so, but they're seeing the benefits when you kind of start slowly. And now I really feel like I've gotten to this level with some of my families where, you know, I'm walking in like a real SI session, kind of like, all right, how are we feeling? Let's look around. What are we doing? You know, and the parent is right there ready to go. But that's still anxiety provoking for me because I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be a good session or not every session, you know, and then I'm always like, oh, you know, goodness.
Well, we may want to be, you know, the families might be very conscientious about the state of their home, you know, so like you're having a guest in here and is it clean enough or straightened up enough, or my kids have toys all over and I don't want you to see that. So I think maybe giving a prelude to the actual intervention, which is what are we actually looking at? What are we doing? You know, you don't need to clean up your house before we shoot a little corner, and maybe just take some of the stress down for the family about their performance, their, you know, what they need to do in terms of preparing for you to be in their home.
I do, I can add to that a little bit. One of the things I try and do is normalize it for the families a little bit, and I let them know beforehand, just so you know, I'm home too, and you might see my house and it might be messy. You might hear my children. They might actually step in and say hello, or you might hear my dogs. So I kind of let them know, like, I'm in this as well, and no judgment here. So I try and give them that, let them know that I'm just here for your kiddo.
You know, there's a couple real practical questions going on in the chat. One is what platforms we're using, and another is related to billing. I don't know if anyone was planning to talk about that, but since we're getting those questions, maybe some of you could chime in on those topics.
We started right away with ClockTree because they were doing a free trial, but I think they got, we wanted to get up and running right away because the school district, one of the school districts that we were serving, we wanted to be prepped and ready to go. But I think some of these platforms really got overwhelmed. So we had to jump quickly, and we went ahead and jumped to Zoom because we knew that it had experience, and we purchased so that it would be encrypted. Now that I've been using the model, I recognize the value of it, and am looking at other platforms that actually you can do the documentation, and they interface with our billing and documentation fusion. I think TheraLink is one of those.
I'm using Zoom mainly. I also use Doxy at first. Doxy, and that's very more medical. Like there's a waiting room, and it's doctor. It was a very much more formal, and I think it's being used with doctors and medical professionals in a little bit of different way. And I felt like it didn't quite work for me in terms of I couldn't record the session, and there wasn't as many features as Zoom. But I had a family just tell me, we can't be in the house today. I'm going to call you on WhatsApp. And that happened. And I was like, well, I think I might need to send you a waiver. I'm not sure. So I mean, I think that you have these moments of where you're making decisions in the moment based on the internet connectivity of the families, what they have to work with. Do they have an iPad? Do they have a phone that can go outside? Are you really stationary on a desktop computer? I mean, so the interfaces that the families are working with too, I think very much have impacted what platforms I've been using.
Well, I know one of the questions that came in was what a typical session looks like. And I think that kind of is a good segue to assessment, because I think if we're talking about an intervention session, it's guided by our assessment. So do you guys have some good ideas about how that goes? Annie?
Yes, sorry. Managing the mute button.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about assessment lately. I've been talking about it with a lot of colleagues and how this would come up. I know we've had a few families come in really thinking, hey, we've got some free time. Let's start tackling some OT and let's try and get an assessment down. We have yet to do an assessment, but it's really spurred me to think about what we could do and why. And looking at the literature, it's really limited. Actually, there's not any literature on ASI's effectiveness or assessment in ASI and telehealth. And so just thinking through what we need to consider, and when there isn't evidence, we need to let our practices guide our evidence and develop that evidence. So I think using a guide like data-driven decision making gives us a clear structure on how to develop those hypotheses from our assessment tools that we're using, kind of carry that through. But in terms of tools, I think we want to continue to be a science-driven profession, and going to parent, just taking a step backwards and doing parent questionnaires, I think that limits us, and it isn't very science-driven. So when we can do assessments, performance-based assessments, we should. Now, they're not valid or reliable for telehealth. So I think we need to be clear about that in our write-ups and when we're reporting our scores. And if we see something that's kind of not fitting the picture that we are pulling together through our clinical knowledge and clinical reasoning, then we should qualify that, right? And make sure we state that there's this score that it doesn't quite fit. And you know what? My assessments weren't really valid and reliable for telehealth. So probably that might be part of the problem. I do know that some of the publishers, the performance-based test publishers, have some information on their websites about their different assessments, so people can look there. But I've been looking at the SIPT and I've been looking at the EASY, and you can definitely deliver some of those tests. I think via telehealth, and thinking through creative ways to deliver it, having the parent record the child, you send a pre-recorded video of yourself doing it. But I think getting some performance assessment is really important. And if you cannot get a standard score, at least recording the raw scores so you could have a pre and a post outcome. So you can see what your effectiveness is. But I do think the assessment piece is really important, especially if they're a new child to you. But if they're a current child, I think doing an assessment where you're reviewing what you already know of them, and then doing kind of this new needs assessment within, as you're kind of doing your first few sessions, like tell me about what the affordances are of the environment. What are your needs? Thinking about your purpose for moving to a telehealth model with this child. More than we are in a pandemic and we can't see them live. Maybe there needs to be more purpose than that, because is it even appropriate for a child? I think there's a lot of pieces to think through and be careful about, but I think that assessment is still very important because you're changing your delivery model and you want to make sure you're effective. You're not just going to deliver to deliver. You want to make sure you're moving in the right direction. And if you're changing your goals, you should have some type of assessment that guides you towards that.
They're such good points, Annie. I think I've been a little concerned all along that the telehealth model could throw us further into the whatever, just throw activities and try this, try that, and see if something sticks. So I think we now more than ever really need to be thinking about some form of assessment. I think about when therapists first learned some of these assessment tools in sensory integration, how eye-opening it is, when you see that a child can't not tell which finger you're touching, or they cannot possibly imitate some of these positions, that it's another opportunity to help the family to understand why the child is having some of the daily life struggles that they're having, when they can really get at a better understanding of those underlying sensory integrative functions. So again, not to be Pollyanna, but I think we want to think about where we have these opportunities, and having the parents help us with some of these assessment tasks. It really does give them a chance to understand why their child stands there frozen when they ask them to go get, the laundry or to try to do something, the motor planning that's involved, or the body perception. So, and being systematic. It's also a time where we have to more than ever be assessing our outcomes. Is this intervention really effective? Do we need to change things up? We always need to be doing that, but now more than ever.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Zoe and Annie. I think accountability is key, because it's one thing to say, oh, well, we're going to give you some really great activities that's going to keep your kid busy for an hour. And it's a whole other thing to think we're going to be delivering therapeutic activities and modifying the environmental structure according to the specific customized needs of the individual, and then do the consultation with the families so that we're actually moving the needle of development into, something that, is beneficial for that child. So, we do a lot of assessments. We haven't done any virtual, but we do a lot of them in person when we're not in a pandemic. And you do the unstructured observations, and you can do that virtually. You can watch what the child's doing. And I think that's imperative no matter what, for you to come and do that dynamic assessment with your own eyes and see what's happening in the environment. But then when you get into those structured tasks and activities like you have in a performance assessment, that gets a little tricky. But I also think we need to do that as well. So I don't know how, it's bending the standardized instructions a bit to have a proxy. If you're going to use a caregiver or family, to be your proxy for this, how hard it is to do many of these things, even when you're a trained therapist. But as Zoe said, I agree, there's some you can do with the caregiver as a proxy, and at least gives you a little bit more substance to go on as you're designing those therapeutic activities. So I think that moves us into intervention. Maybe we can spend the rest of our time. So the sensory integrative, classic sensory integrative approach has been defined with a really beautiful environment with swings and mats and pillows and tactile things and proprioceptive climbing things. And I think the million-dollar question is, if that's appropriate for the child based on your assessment findings, how do you do that in this telehealth model? Who wants to tackle that? Asia?
Well, I'll just, I'll start. I think that everyone has, I think we all have some very important ideas about this, but I think that if you have your theory and the ASI methodology in your head while you're designing the activities and you're applying them in these different manners, I do think one of the pieces that you really can work on is all of the contextual elements and all of the relational elements, right? You look at the principles of ASI, and so many of them are about the relationship you develop with the client, right? That's child directed, there's collaboration, you ensure success, you're establishing the context of play, and you're grading the challenge so that the child can achieve an adaptive response, right? These are all of our therapeutic, this is the clinical reasoning that we're working with, that we're trying to achieve. And I think a lot of times it's been coaching the parent in the importance of these strategies and these relational pieces, and guiding the parent to help you intervene and practice some of these pieces. So, and then you work on the sensory motor factors, and that's the assessment of the environment. What affordances do they have in their environment that can help you to stimulate the vestibular system, do an activity that's tactile enriching for the child. So, I think you can take all of the tenets of SI, and then you just have to apply it creatively in these different ways. But keeping your framework is really so key. It's been so foundational for then my clinical reasoning on how I'm developing activities for the families and how I'm coaching the parents to interact with their child.
Anybody else?
Katie's had some really good sessions. Why don't you share some of your surprises?
Oh my. Well, there's a surprise in every session. Oh man. Honestly, there's just being flexible, I think, is really, really the key. And I think we'll go into this maybe in a little bit, but having a treatment plan really does help you kind of organize what you want to do, but thinking on your feet when you are in a virtual platform and you can't be there to like physically facilitate or physically guide, that's a big change. And it takes a lot to keep the child engaged.
I love the story where the dad started bringing out his athletic equipment. Could share that with the group.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking you had a story in mind. So I've got a little guy on the spectrum, and I'm doing one of the initial sessions with him and his dad, and I hadn't sent out a treatment plan beforehand. I was still trying to get used to them just in the home setting. And his dad comes in he's like, okay, I have my Bosu ball and my foam roller and a ring that you stretch your back on. He goes, okay, son, this is how you roll out on your back. You can roll your legs. I was like, no. Like, he's not foam rolling. Get on that Bosu. That's an island. What is that foam roller? And the boy's like, it's a sword. I'm like, yes. Within a couple minutes, we're really teaching the father a different context of play, rather than using, some families are playful, some are a little bit more rigid, and they don't have that playful manner really embedded in them. But with a little bit of facilitation on our end, I mean, for 10-15 minutes after that, they were just going at it, and he was leading in a really therapeutic way. And then afterwards he's like, did we do anything? And I'm like, that was amazing. The therapeutic alliance there was great. You guys collaborated. He was working on his postural, ocular, bilateral, like so many things that I would have loved to been able to, facilitate myself. He was now able to do, and really being able to teach the parents how to switch that from being more of a, kind of a directive to more collaborative and playful is a really big, that's a big plus that we get with telehealth. Because when I see a lot of the kids in my sessions, it's us and parents, sometimes they'll be in, but a lot of times they take that as their break. And here they really get to learn and view things firsthand. And it's really carried over. It's generalized and carried over, which has been huge.
Katie, let me just say, we're getting a lot of questions from our attendees, and we'll probably not be able to answer them all, but I want to say to the panelists, if you can, maybe you can answer them privately. Some of them probably are easier than others, but there's a lot of people saying, asking what we do with the other, family members that jump in the sessions, like brothers or sisters. This is such a great explanation how you can incorporate them, and it's so beneficial for all of them. And someone was asking about the outline of a session. Do we do the same clinical reasoning that you do when you are in your clinic, while you are at, in front of a computer? Do you have the same concerns, or there's something else that you need to keep on mind?
I know that I had a session today with a 2-year-old who has autism, and I will say we did 45 minutes with the family and we were good. So it's possible, everybody, that this can be done. And this is a nonverbal 2-year-old, very active. And so my clinical reasoning with him is I know that he needs some movement to get his regulation going. And so I was lucky enough to have mom and dad present, and we started with both of them holding the ends of the blanket and just rocking it at first, like the hammock swing. But then, he was getting a little antsy, and me as the therapist knows that this child needs intensity. He needs a lot of intensity. So I was able to guide the parents in how to close the blanket sides a little bit and really start to swing him more. And they were like, oh, he really likes this now, and you're like, yes, so we moved. So we started with that. And what I'm finding, though, is that the parents are uncomfortable staying with that activity for a longer period of time. I really have to kind of say, it's okay. If we were in a clinic, I would start him in a swing. So we're just starting it this way. And then we were able to move into some more kind of, I did blanket rolling, where you roll the child up in the blanket, and then really teaching the parent how to lift up the end and let him roll out. And then he would run around, and the parents were like, wait, come back. And I was like, just wait and tap the blanket. Just wait. And he would come back, and he came back like 7 or 8 times, and that I said, and they were like, wow, he's coming back, and he must really like this. It's like, yes, like this, we're giving him all of this intensity. So, from the SI theory kind of perspective, I was really starting in that regulation for him. And then they had to have a big therapy ball, and the couch was right there. So I said, take off the cushion, put the therapy ball where that cushion was, and let's do some climbing over the ball, over the edge of that, and crashing into the pillow over there, And so at first he's climbing and showing that and telling parents, oh, see how he's sliding across, and, and here he is at the end, and he's head down wanting that somersault. And I was like, give him that somersault. That's that intensity he wants, And then again, he would come back. And by the end of that activity, we saw that adaptive response where he was co-contracting, his head and neck was up, his stomach was off the ball. So we had this really beautiful moment. And then I was able to guide them into kind of more of we did some scooping he has some goals for utensil use. So then we did some scooping and those kinds of things. And they were just like, he's sitting and he's looking at it and he's attending, and I was like, and so the dad had this moment where he said, oh, like you have to do all this stuff first. And I was like, yeah, and I went through the whole process. We had the arousal, we had some body awareness, motor planning, postural challenges. And then we had a really focused, more praxis, fine motor task for him. And the parents were really, they were sold, they were like, this is it. Like, and I'm hearing it multiple times from families when we're working this way that they're attending to you better than anybody else. And so I always make sure I point out to them, well, what am I doing? What am I doing that's different? And they're like, well, you're doing this intense movement. And I'm like, yes, so figuring out what you've got in that environment and how to make it intense enough for our kids within the parents' comfort level has been a challenge. But, like I said, I'm on week 4 and we're getting there now. So it takes some building up in their confidence. But I've been able to I'm going through that therapeutic process each session.
Kelly, I really liked how you described the session. And what I liked hearing the most is that you started with your clinical reasoning and that you already had an idea that that child needed more intense vestibular proprioceptive input, would respond, it would change arousal, and then you have this relatively simple activity that really the child engaged and came back, and that method, and then the families get the benefit of your clinical reasoning. So it isn't just, oh, he likes to swing and we're going to swing, but they get the benefit of understanding the potential short-term and long-term impact of these therapeutic activities.
Yeah, and I think the dad said he might actually nap today. And I said, yeah, you should want to do something like this every day.
Every morning.
Yeah.
That's an excellent daily life activity occupation that every child needs.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you know, we're going to offer a lot more activities and strategies in the course we're developing.
Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Sure, I can go into that a little bit. So there's been a lot of questions about in the chat I saw about activities and wanting to know what different activity ideas. And I think we're really excited about this module that we've put together related to delivering ASI through telehealth, or an ASI informed approach through telehealth. And what this program is really going to do is walk the participants through an introduction, developing your purpose, your reason, pulling assessment data. And when I say assessment, I don't necessarily mean a comprehensive evaluation. I'm talking about like what we mentioned, this kind of needs assessment of what are the affordances of the environment as well, like really having to think on your feet and clinically reason in the moment with the tools that you have available. So not only will we give you activity ideas in our intervention section, we'll have lots of fun videos for you to see and all that kind of great stuff, but we're also going to impart strategies for using your clinical reasoning that you already have as advanced trained ASI therapists, using that clinical reasoning to use your environment that you're given, the tools that are there, so that if sometimes we get stuck in the activities, and if we don't have the equipment, then we don't have an activity. But really, we have activities. We have clinical reasoning, we have environment, and we have a child that needs us, so we have it all. So it's a really exciting module. And Kelly, how many hours will it be? Do you have that?
I do. Right now, the plan is that it'll be 10 hours. So it's a combination of the online learning with our with narrated PowerPoints, but also we have some supplemental activities and videos and things to really enhance the program and your own needs for the application piece of it as well. So it's not 10 hours of just listening to PowerPoint, but there's also some application pieces to really facilitate clinical reasoning. And I think that's really our goal, is facilitating the clinical reasoning over the application of Ayres SI in telehealth, really. And that's been a question I've been seeing coming up. Are we calling it sensory integration? Are we calling it this? And what we're calling it is an application of Ayres SI theory. It's not true Ayres. It's, if we're looking at fidelity, if we were to measure these, we're missing a lot of components that make it a true Ayres SI session, but we are applying it. We're applying that theory. And that's what I say, I'm applying Ayres SI theory.
And, if you don't mind, just to back up a little bit, because, we didn't do this as an infomercial, although, we have the opportunity to let you guys know about this. But one of the ideas from a CLASI point of view was that we saw all of these amazing therapists that we work with and know and love, working like crazy to get together their telehealth possibilities. And in the first few minutes, first few days, there were more or less successes, and these conversations were happening. So we thought, well, rather than taking a shotgun approach and everybody's trying to do their own thing, what if we pull these resources, and then each of you kind of took a different section so we could do a deep dive into this and really look at what the American OT Association is putting out, what the new HIPAA guidelines are. You've got the platforms emerging. I mean, this is all sort of emergent in real time. So that was kind of the impetus. And also, we don't know how long we're going to be in the stay home. But I want to say one more thing. Even after we're not stay home because there's a pandemic, we've known for a long time that we need to do better in getting these tools into the hands of families and in the homes and in the communities. So I think that this is not a limitation, that we're not exactly replicating the fidelity principles in ASI from a clinical setting, but expanding its use and applicability, because that will help it be more generalizable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that creating it, allowing our clinical reasoning and our thought process behind each activity has been and to have it generalized into the home and to be able to teach the families has been the best part of this. Initially I was like, oh, telehealth, I don't know. And it has been amazing. It's been a great learning experience. It's been, so helpful for these families, because so many times, kids are one way in the clinic and then they're like, oh, well, they don't do this at home. And I'm like, okay, let's make it happen at home. And now they can.
Yeah.
That was exactly
great.
what I was going to say is that was a big surprise for us of how valuable of a tool this is, to really, that was such a great example to Kelly, that you gave on coaching that family through that session. And we're seeing it time and time again. It's like the light bulbs are going on. We will spend time debriefing with the family, or they'll even be a part of the session. But when they're actually doing the session and they're seeing the change in their child, it is so valuable. When we have been putting these slides together for the presentation or the continuing ed course, what we did was we did a brush over of what is ASI. Now, what does it look like in telehealth? So we went slide by slide through the elements, and it's like, okay, these were the challenges that we had been grappling with. And there's certain things that you definitely need to be more intentional about in order to reach the child through the virtual platform. And that's what the intention of the presentation is to really go step by step, like how have we done it, how have we applied it, and what were some of our real life experiences, and we do share those in the course.
That's
Maybe
great.
I can just jump in and say a lot of people are asking if we can email them information, and our wonderful executive director, Katie Estrada, just let me know that she's going to email everyone who signed up for this webinar. She's going to email everyone a discount promo code that you can use for a little discount. Again, we weren't trying to make this a commercial, but our intention is as always to help the therapists and to help children and families during this time. We've also had in mind, we're thinking about all the students who are about, or who were about to go out on their clinical field work. So we're just doing our best to come up with some resources that will continue to support everyone. So anyone who signed up by email will be getting more information, and will get a discount code.
Okay, and so we have more 5 minutes. There's time flies, but I don't know if you want to summarize any information somehow, or something that you think it's most important from your experience or was not talked here so much. But we have a lot of questions that we couldn't just adlet because it's a lot. And thank you so much we have more than 300 people live. That's amazing.
Yeah, at one point there was almost 400.
We're so happy.
I know.
To share this time with you. Yeah.
One of the things we can do is we can look at the questions in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
as well as some of the questions that had come in or still coming in, and we'll see if we can maybe work some of those into the resources with the online module as well.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe just post them on Facebook, on CLASI's Facebook, or on Instagram pages, so we could have content that will actually help people in their day-to-day learning experiences, right?
And if the participants have resources that they don't mind sharing, that's also really wonderful. So thank you. I know we have experts on this webinar that we're not even hearing from. We know many of you around the world are doing such amazing work, and we don't always hear from you. But yeah, so thank you in advance. But do you guys have any little summary like Marco is?
I do.
Okay.
I think I know telehealth is scary. I think we all agree that we were nervous when we started and we weren't sure how it would turn out, but it's exceeded our expectations. We are so happy with what we're able to give our families. And I think it's really expanded our connection with our families and how we've been able to translate what we're doing for kids. And there's so many aha moments where families are just understanding now why their child comes into the clinic one way and leaves another. And now they're seeing it in their home and how they can do it for themselves. And so it's been so powerful. And I just want you guys to all be excited to do telehealth and just dive in. It's scary, but just dive in. It'll be fun.
It's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And we're seeing the outcomes. And so I don't know, we need to now, I think the next step is going to be, how do we document these reports from the parents and the caregivers of the changes they're seeing? Like an activity I did with a child last week, this mom had bought, I don't know how many pieces of equipment from that I had used in the clinic. And he's like, well, he never uses it at home. Well, this is a very dyspraxic child. And just with one session, I was able to kind of, well, we need to, I used my OT hat to eliminate space, change the environment, and have her work on just one activity with this beautiful Lycra swing she bought. And now she texted me that he's been using it every day since that session, every day for the last week. And she couldn't get him to use it it had been a year. I had been working with this boy, for a year. She had owned it and he had never gotten on it. And all I needed to do was tell her it needed to be lower. You need to eliminate everything else that's hanging in the space. You need to clear the space, make it just, and it's working. So I think you'll see the impact of the family. And don't discount your brain, your knowledge of ASI and your clinical reasoning and for activity analysis and environmental modifications really matters and makes a difference, and is a perspective that maybe the family doesn't have.
Well, Aisha, that was a nice ending statement. So I think we're here. We're at 6 o'clock. This hour went so fast. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to everybody, Marco, Katie, Zoe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great.
Everyone.
I love seeing all of you every week. And so what's next Wednesday, Suzanne? What's coming up next Wednesday?
Wednesday is play. It's play, right? We're going to
Yes.
We're going to play with Diane Parham, who has a book, Fazio and Parham on play. We have Sue Knox, who did the play scale.
Sue Knox is coming.
The Knox play scale? Are you
Yes. But wait. We got one more. We got Anita Bundy, who did the test of playfulness. Yeah, so we got our play friends. They're going to join us next Wednesday, and we're going to learn how to play together a little bit more.
Fun.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah. All right, so join us next Wednesday. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Stay safe, everyone. Stay
Bye-bye.
connected. Stay positive. Stay safe. Stay home. Love you all.
Okay.
Love
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.